Oh, I'm letting people in, but it just, okay, so yeah, one person is calling. So, Ari, if you just want to give a quick introduction and get to it.
Okay. Hi, my name's Ariana Norris Landry, and I'm here to do your history of the second wave and how it fell down and how capitalism failed feminism, um, and what went on. I was involved in the movement in Arizona, which was vastly different than the rest of the country because our movement for women rose out of the migrant farm worker movement, at least there. So we had a largely um, Hispanic and Hispanic American women were drivers behind that. And they were coming from a place of extreme poverty, or what you would consider, extreme working class people. And so their demands for things were very different than what a lot of places in the country saw. And when we grew out of that area, the things that we were promised or that we were looking for, where you had working class women that were advocating for full-time Head Start in a state that had no kindergarten even, and whereas on the national level they were looking for flex time and an on-site type of daycare in the corporation, if you can imagine, because that still hasn't happened. When the ERA was denied in Arizona, among other places, but we were one of the last states. Um, we had been promised as women that things were going to change in the workplace. And for women that had been working class for eons, that didn't provide a lot of change, but we were looking for fairer treatment in the workplace, looking for laws that would protect us from being sexually assaulted and harassed in our workplace, and that would protect our rights as women, as mothers, as parents, and things like that. So instead of giving us maternity leave that actually did something for us and had an expanded period of time, you got the Family Leave Act, which, I'm sorry, but a woman who works at a Kmart or Walmart or in the fields um, has no use for 6 weeks of unpaid leave. She can't afford that. And we still see that today, that those promises that came out of capitalism, um, for women and for working women were not what we needed. It was what the upper and upper middle class, I guess you could say, had decided, um, where you have a situation like, um, for us, it was much more like Ruth Bader Ginsburg's mother, where my own father didn't believe girls should go to college. So that left me on my own to get my way into college and to get through college. And I will say that without the men that backed me, um, I would not have been able to finish college because I was in a hard science major and I had teachers that actually tried to flunk me, because they didn't approve of women. And this is not ancient history, this is 1982. So for those that are looking at it and going, oh, why do we need feminism anymore? We need feminism because we need equality, and we need equality for men and women at the same time so that they can be the best person they can and do the job that they want to do, that they are actually able to get the education that they want or that they need for the field that they want to go into. And the other thing we saw happen was what I call the, well, I guess I probably shouldn't use that word. It was the denigration of women as professionals. When I was growing up, it was teachers and nurses and things like that. If you were really lucky, you could become like a legal secretary. Um, but women, for the most part, that were working class did not aspire to be lawyers because we didn't have that as something that women could do. We didn't see that. in our communities as working women, working class women. Um, and so when you go further on, now we're looking at and we're screaming at teachers to go back into schools, and they still by and large are women. Um, and we don't know enough about the pandemic, but we're screaming at them to go back in schools because we see schools as a daycare center. We don't see them as an educational institution, at least not on the elementary levels. Nurses by the mid 80s, an RN was the person doing the paperwork. She was not doing active nursing, and for the most part, especially on wards and things in the hospitals. And so you had the LPNs, which is a licensed practical nurse, and then you had CNAs, and that's what you see by and large these days. And again, the pandemic is exposing those disparities in protections because most of the people that are healthcare workers that have died from contact with patients are nurses of one sort or another, or they're CNAs, or what they call paraprofessionals now. And that is a word that came out of the mid 80s, that you could be a paralegal, you could be a paramedic, you could, and all of these things were set out to me as honey traps, because it was, oh, you could be a paralegal, but don't bother going to law school. You could be a paramedic, but don't try and be a doctor. And I think that if you look now and you look back, that we thought because we were going to get something that it was better than nothing. But it has proven over the last 40 years or whatever, it's basically nothing. And we do need feminism. We need to demand for our rights as women, as workers, as people in work and at work, and also at home. And if I just want to say one thing else about it, is that I saw a quote last night because I was reading through things, and basically, as long as women are expected to not only, because now we have to work, even if you're an aspiring middle class woman, you work your butt off now, because otherwise you can't afford to live. And aspiring to survive is something that I don't think we should have to do. We shouldn't have to scramble. And the one thing that Justice Ginsburg did that was incredibly smart, she prosecuted the cases for sex discrimination for men originally, because otherwise the courts wouldn't hear us. But I think that it's time that women stop being nice, stop waiting, and that we do like the original suffragists did and have a demand and hold to that demand, and that we're not to be left behind to struggle and scrimp and be school teachers and still going to work and still doing the majority of the household care and things like that. So we need to strive for that equality for all of us. And I think feminism addresses that, and socialism addresses that in a much better way than capitalism does, simply because capitalism will feed you lies with your paycheck, and then they take half your paycheck to fund those lies. And you'll never see whatever it is they promised you. So.
Thank you, Ari. So I really look up, I'm so nervous to speak with these two speakers because they're both women I really look up to, and have been very successful in their organizing, and really inspire me. So thank you, Ari, and thank you everyone for coming. If you don't know me, my name is Stephanie. I'm currently in Minneapolis. My pronouns are she, her. I've been a party member for 20 years. I serve on the National Committee. I'm also the convener of the Women's Commission. And I will put my email in the comments just in case you have any questions for me or about the Women's Commission. So to build a movement to resist and replace late stage capitalism, what we need, what the party needs, and what the world needs is intersectional socialist feminism. It breaks my heart when I talk to people on the far left and they see feminism as kind of the domain of liberals, or maybe even as a hindrance to radical organizing and revolution rather than a vital and necessary part of it. It's time now for us to reclaim feminism. If we allow non-leftists to define feminism and claim it as their own, they will do what liberals do with every grassroots movement. They will twist it to serve the ruling class, allow it to be defined and led by the most privileged of women, and offer cosmetic changes and token victories rather than systemic change. The reality of elitist pro-capitalist feminism is that it disproportionately represents the interests of the straight, able-bodied, neurotypical, and privileged. It excludes trans women, non-binary people, and tokenizes people of color. Call it what you will, liberal feminism, white feminism, corporate feminism, bourgeois feminism, capitalist feminism. It all reflects the same problem of mainstream feminism. So if you cringe at the pink hats and the lean-in mentality, pantsuit nation, and the celebration of wealthy women, good. You should, and I agree. But our critique needs to come from the far left, not repeating anti-feminist talking points of the alt-right. If we allow liberals to define feminism or use conservative anti-feminist arguments to combat liberal feminism, we allow the ruling class to claim and destroy yet another movement that rightfully belongs to us. Anyone who allows liberals to define feminism or uses their definition of feminism as an excuse to shed the label feminist is complicit in this thievery. Intersectional socialist feminism can be the only true form of feminism, as to be a feminist is to seek to dismantle all hierarchies and forms of oppression. Feminism without class analysis is hollow and contradictory. It offers no true solutions to the roots of patriarchy. Feminism cannot be apolitical. Any ideology that seeks emancipation and revolutionary change will always be radical. Capitalism thrives and depends on sexism. Women are encouraged to ignore the sexism in the system, otherwise we won't get ahead. Women are told they can conquer patriarchy if they make enough money, as the capitalist mindset is one where money and profit supersedes all else. The logic of the feminist working for change within the capitalist system is the same as the logic of a socialist working within a capitalist party. Why overthrow the system when you could fight for a spot at the top of the hierarchy? Surely you could be more effective there, right? But you can't climb to the top of an oppressive system without becoming an oppressor and abandoning the core meaning of what it means to be a feminist. Pro-capitalist feminism doesn't address the root causes of systemic oppression. Intersectional socialist feminism does. Bourgeois feminists have all but given up on the subject of unpaid work. They simply try to guilt men into doing more of it, and very unsuccessfully at that. But without this unpaid labor, capitalism could not exist. Liberal feminism offers a real solution to the subject of the gender pay gap, as capitalism encourages and thrives off divisions between workers. Their endgame is one where there are more women CEOs, not one where CEOs can no longer exploit people for profit, all while paying women less for the same work. Our endgame isn't fitting into capitalism or smothering our individuality to make ourselves more profitable to our capitalist overlords. Our endgame is ending patriarchy, snuffing out white supremacy, and replacing capitalism. Instead of building a society where people are valued regardless of their gender, and stereotypes are seen as the oppressive and hateful forces they are, a pro-capitalist feminist demands women abandon all that is stereotypically feminine as a necessary part of the pathway to success. We've all heard it. Speak louder, be assertive, lean in. This mentality assumes discrimination is the fault of those experiencing it and puts the impetus to change on the victims of systemic oppression. The problem isn't that women don't speak up. The problem is what happens when they do. You may notice a pattern here. All the liberal solutions to patriarchy tend to help enshrine capitalism rather than gender equality. The focus of changing women to fit a patriarchal system rather than smashing patriarchy itself is peak liberal bullshit. I'm not giving anyone here permission to attack feminists. It's a bad look when someone who has benefited heavily from patriarchy tells someone who has been victimized by their entire life by patriarchy that they don't understand their own oppression. And being any kind of feminist is not and never has been easy. If you take anything from what I have said here today, I hope what you take from this is that feminism is not the problem. The way it has been defamed, corporatized, and twisted to serve the ruling class is the problem. If every feminist there is a potential ally, every feminist there is a potential ally if we allow them to recognize that feminism and capitalism are completely incompatible. So why, as socialists, do we need to consider feminism? Aren't we feminists by default? Although capitalism exacerbates all forms of bigotry and divisions between the working class, I assure you that the left is not free from this same bigotry. Alternatives to capitalism are not automatically feminist. Although capitalism is patriarchal, it did not invent the patriarchy, and I repeat, eliminating capitalism does not guarantee a feminist society. The patriarchal mindset, as well as the liberal versions of feminism, drift into and poison radical anti-capitalist spaces. What is true in our personal lives and the corporate world is true in politics as well. Instead of listening to people, no matter their gender identity or how they express themselves, we often encourage leaders and organizers to act stereotypically masculine, praise so-called strong women as if that's a unique or unfeminine trait, and encourage conformity to a gender binary. And we wonder why our party has such trouble recruiting and keeping leaders, organizers, and members from the marginalized groups we claim to represent. This is not a problem unique to the Socialist Party USA. I acknowledge I am guilty of this thinking as well, especially when it comes to thinking and framing my speech within a gender binary. It is difficult to break through a way of thinking you've been raised in and experienced your entire life. It takes a lot of work, personal responsibility, and learning from our failures, but we must be willing to do this work, support, and understand each other. So personally and strategically, I am in favor of building and supporting the identity commissions as places where marginalized groups can organize for their own emancipation, advise leadership, draft statements on issues specific to them, and mentor potential Socialist Party leaders. The Women's Commission, a commission that is open to all non-men, has helped mitigate member disputes and serves as a built-in support structure that helps members deal with the reality of being a marginalized person in the political sphere. The Women's Commission also helps provide content and workshops like this one. But commissions like ours cannot exist and be effective if the party unless the party actively supports them. So please consider joining our commission, actively recruiting other members to join and get involved, or building, joining, or supporting other commissions. We cannot build an unabashedly intersectional socialist feminist party if it is a party of and led by straight, cis, white men, no matter how good our intentions. As radicals, it is our duty not only to imagine a new society and organize the working class, but to live up to our own ideals at work, at home, while organizing, and in all that we do. Thank you.
All right, good job, Stephanie. Very well said, and really important points made there. And I just want to introduce myself for anyone who doesn't know me. My name is Chelsea Rustad. I live in Tumwater in Washington, and I'm the chair of the Puget Sound Socialist Party. I've been a member of the Socialist Party USA since early 2017. And I ran for Tumwater City Council that same year, and it was kind of my introduction to electoral politics and all of the nastiness that comes with that, the way that money controls issues there, and the perception of feminism that comes with that. So I wanted to use this time to really get into a subject that I feel like has been pushed to the side for this, especially during this election year. Already our news cycle has kind of a goldfish memory, and things are forgotten in 2 weeks when something else comes up. But so what we haven't really seen a lot of important critical discussion around is the Me Too and Believe Women movements, because because they're not beneficial to the narratives that are supported by the Democrats and Republicans because of who they've nominated. It makes both of them look really bad. So because of that, you know, of course the Republicans, they never even pretended ever to pretend to care about women, about victims, about sexual harassment and all these things. So we don't ever look to them for any type of promotion of women's rights. They kind of instead go the opposite reactionary direction and say, you know, oh, like you saw Trump supporters wearing shirts that said, oh, he can grab me by the pussy all he wants. Like just really vulgar and just like, how much more can I possibly betray women? So, but the Democrats do this other thing where if they see an opportunity to kind of co-opt that movement and steer you back in, funnel you back into their own capitalist opportunism, then that's where they get that chance to say, oh, we believe women, and we can use the hashtags and have some really nice, clever sound bites, and have a clever sign at a rally or something like that. And it's very performative. It's very surface level, because what they're doing really at its core, more of like a white feminism. And so what is that? You know, I don't want to assume that everybody's familiar with the same terms. That's what I found out when I ran for city council. In the voters pamphlet, I said, I'm an intersectional feminist. And people came up to me and asked, you know, Chelsea, what does that mean? What does intersectional feminism mean? So, you know, I want to make sure that those terms are understood and that we're on the same page. What is white feminism? Basically, it's an understanding that any movement, anything that really happens in the United States, even something that professes to be promoting and in support of like progressive values such as feminism, will default to whiteness if left to its own devices, if left in the control of the mainstream media, of the capitalist corporate news outlets, and the Democrat and Republican parties. It will absolutely center whiteness. It will prioritize whiteness. And so Black women and Native women, anyone that's not white is not really part of that conversation. They're not involved, they're not at the table. They're certainly not the person on TV, the person being supported, the person who the rally, the person that's being elected. Because whiteness comes forward and says, I'll save you, I'll be your white savior, and I'm going to help all the women. But that's not what we have seen happen when capitalist women from the Democrat and Republican parties they achieve that power. They are elected, and then they act on behalf of whiteness. That is their first priority. That's what they answer to. So, so that's kind of like the initial layer that's happening there. And then there's also kind of a class reduction aspect that happens when you get people who ascribe to socialism, who identify as a leftist, and then, you know, but they don't ground that socialism in an intersectional feminism, then it be class reduction to it, and it will say that class is all that matters and everything else is just identity politics. Well, you know, that's not helpful either, because if we talk about socialism, and we're not going to talk about all of the ways that capitalism specifically impacts women, and then breaking that down further into, you know, how does it affect Black women and single moms and LGBTQ women and women who aren't neurotypical. Those are all their own important issues, and they should be addressed as such through the lens of a class critique. So that's what intersectional feminism is about, is bringing those things together with a recognition that it does make a difference and it is important. You can't treat everyone all the same and call that equality, because everyone has their own specific needs that must be addressed and understood. So, and that's what we don't get with the white feminist approach, which kind of like this, you know, if it's going to touch on feminism and say that it's empowering women and like, oh yeah, I'm pro girl power, what they mean by that traditionally is like, I'm a lady boss, and I'm getting my money, I'm getting paid, I'm so rich, I'm flaunting my wealth, and capitalism loves that. We have like endless reality shows promoting that, and they also kind of like to fixate on, you know, if there is a like a woman CEO, and they're like, wow, look how powerful she is. Or you get a woman who is elected to office, and she could be a multimillionaire who's taking endless donations from lobbyists who are in the pocket of pharmaceutical companies and fracking and oil and all of this, like basically just doing all the same oppressive policies as any man that would be in the same position. And oh, but she's a woman, so we have a representation now. And that's just where it stops. That's where they want the conversation to end. Because see, isn't that inspiring to you? Isn't that great to know that you as a woman could be the one to put your high heel stiletto on the neck of other working class women and exploit them and harm them and deny them health care and take away their benefits at work? Like, wow, isn't that, I don't feel empowered by that. That's not what I aspire to be in my life, because it's harmful. And so white feminism really amounts to kind of more of like, you know, intersectional imperialism. Like it's like capitalism for her, and they can brand it that way all they want, and you know, they do that because it works, because very much so, like the American dream is just get rich. I'm gonna get rich, I'm gonna be a millionaire, I'm gonna be the boss. And if they, you know, every now and then a woman like Elizabeth Holmes comes forward to be the CEO of Theranos, and they're like, see, look, see, that could be you. And then, but then they also get to say that like, oh, she messed up, so women aren't really good at things, and she had to fall from grace. So, you know, you need to do everything she did and fake a deep baritone voice so that people will respect you more and see you more with like masculine qualities, and still fail. And but that's the, you know, she was considered a hero and lauded as some role model by the women in her company because she's a woman CEO. And that's not at all what our goal is. We need to be promoting something completely different when we talk about intersectional feminism. So, and one of the reasons that that's important for socialism, specifically for feminist socialism, is that the foundation of socialism is solidarity. When we say an injury to one is an injury to all, of course, you know, that has its applications in the workplace. If my fellow worker is being harmed, that's a direct threat to me and to all other workers. And so the same holds true when we see a woman who has been assaulted or been abused, and they come forward and they share that. You cannot say that you believe and support victims of CSA, of sexual assault or abuse, and then turn your back on one who accused someone because, oh, well, they accused a Democrat, so they're lying. And that's also a thing that's what's happening right now with white feminists, with liberals who they don't want to hear that about Joe Biden right now. They need to have this belief that he's going to be the chosen one who saves them from Trump. Trump has been taking on all of the characteristics of like the evil Disney villain who's like, he's the cause of everything bad that's happening in 2020. Of course, we know that's not the case because capitalism has been harming people actively, just nonstop. 2020 was not the beginning of that. There's a lot of really extreme and bizarre happening things this year with the pandemic and everything that's come with that, with the virus. But Donald Trump is a symptom of capitalism. So when they fixate so much on that and say, well, we have to support Joe Biden so that we can defeat Trump, that's not harm reduction. That is harm deferment with interest, and it's going to be paid back later. And it's still going to hit women and other marginalized people the hardest. And not only that, but the whole point of having these grounding ourselves in these values is that when times get hard, that's when our moral values are most important. That's not when you say, oh well, I believe women, but not right now. It's just too hard. I don't want to take the heat. I don't want to take the black because I'm supposed to vote for Joe Biden. I don't really think there's a situation where turning your blind eye to sexual assault is okay. I don't care what the circumstances are. I really don't. You could make up any scenario you like, and the one that is happening right in front of us is probably weirder than anything, stranger than fiction. Literally, both parties are running nominees who have been credibly accused of sexual assault or sexual abuse from multiple women, and it's horrifying to see that has been normalized, and that's our reality. And both sides are they're like meh to their guy, but then the other guy does it, and they're like, oh, I see Trump supporters posting videos of like, look at creepy Biden sniffing girls and touching on little girls, and like, yeah, he did that, but you are saying that as a Trump supporter, like you have no grounding to stand on. And Biden supporters talking about what Trump did, or Trump's the young woman, the lady that just came forward recently with a new allegation against Trump, they don't get to talk about that because they decided Tara Reade's a liar because she came forward to accuse Biden. So they don't get to, believe movement is a complete statement. It's not, we don't get to pick and choose. When a sexual assault survivor comes forward and shares that story with you, you can choose to ignore it, but just you're not an ally to women at that point. We have to be consistent in the application of these moral values if we're going to have really any kind of moral standing at all. And so really, yeah, this is what's being put to the test. We're going to find out who truly believes and supports survivors with their actions and not just their words. Anybody can say, oh yes, of course I believe women, but their actions are not showing that. Even if they say that they do, what are they doing to protect women? I'm gonna say probably voting to put a rapist in the White House, not the best thing you could do for women. Not something that's gonna help women, certainly not, this is defining the moral character of this country, is that across the board, Republicans or Democrats are saying, that's fine, I'm okay with that. Rapists, yes, put them in every office as long as they're on my team. So that's kind of like the next step here is that, liberals and conservatives are functionally identical. They attack everything the other side does, even if it's accidentally good, and they defend everything that their guy does, even if it's something that they lost their mind about when the other guy did it. And so we couldn't possibly have a more clear-cut real-world example than with Trump versus Biden. Liberals have spent 4 years saying it's wrong to grab someone by Biden, excuse the vulgarity, but based on Tara Reid's account, he literally did that. And suddenly it's no big deal. And now, and I think about the really vulgar refrain that the answer that liberals had with the Women's March and pussy grabs back. And it feels like, you know, I hate that visual. I hate that motto. It's not something, again, it's not empowering me. I don't want to, you know, we're going to answer sexual assault with sexual assault, like fighting fire with fire. No, that's absolutely not. It's so many layers of hypocritical and insulting to women. It's demeaning to victims that it's, you know, somehow this needs to be said. I can't believe this needs to be like, hey, actually, this is bad. This is not okay. It's not cool when your guy does it. I'm sorry. So, you know, what the worst part about this is that, you know, so liberals would rather, you know, instead of holding their guy accountable and saying, wow, you know, Biden was accused and we can't defend that, we can't take it seriously. What they would rather do than that is re-traumatize rape survivors who are watching this, you know, country's watching, we're hearing what you're saying, we're re-traumatizing all of those people by saying, whatever, we don't care. They're uncritically supporting rapists. They're demanding that a rapist be given the highest office in the land. They accuse survivors of being Russian bots and Trump supporters if they have a problem with this. They demand evidence and trial outcomes, which they didn't demand when Trump did it. And they would rather do all that than just believe women all the time and support socialist feminism, which would protect women rather than silencing and minimizing them. So that's why it's not okay to just be like, you know, to just be quiet on this and sit back and not say anything, because that is the harm that is being enacted on every young girl and every woman that is watching this play out and knowing that that's probably what's going to happen to them if such an incident were to transpire in their life, and then they come forward and they try to confide in someone and say, you know, this happened to me, what should I do? I'm trying to report, I need help. Well, you know, who cares? That is the message. That is the takeaway. They don't care even at that level when we're talking about who's going to be the president. So generally speaking, liberals support white feminism. Women's issues and class issues are not part of their analysis because of that. We also saw this play out in their responses to Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, which is, you know, the other, like, the uprisings this year have been, they've been amazing, they've been inspiring, and it's like there was a tipping point where people had enough and things were happening. But liberals, like, at least in my observation, I'm extremely online, so I'm kind of like, I'm seeing liberal reaction to, especially back when it first kicked off. And there was uprisings in Minnesota and all this. And I don't really see liberals saying a whole lot about Black Lives Matter, the way that they tried to do this performative thing about, oh, I support Christine Blasey Ford and all this. They don't express the outrage. I don't see it to that extent. Because they're using the same my team and your team mentality to make excuses. So when protests started happening in Minnesota, what I saw liberals saying was, those are just agent provocateurs. So those are the outside agitators. That's your team. And this is also right-wing cop rhetoric, basically. That's what they're mimicking. Because liberals don't want to look inward, the bad guy must always somehow be this evil other that's not my team. Like, as if they're not all Americans, as if it where they came from. Oh, they came from out of state. They're all in America. They're all in this country. It doesn't matter. Oh, but it happened on their state and on their watch, as if the protests are worse than the initial incident, which was the murder of George Floyd by police. This does not cross their minds. All they care about is getting in front of it and doing damage control for their team's image and reputation, not addressing the real problem. So when you, and that again is the real danger and the outcome of what happens when you don't have an intersectional approach to feminist issues, to racial issues, to any issues of equality and bigotry in this country. And so it's profoundly harmful and disturbing, and not something that's just like, oh, I wish they'd stop doing that, but they're doing their best. Your best is very bad, and it's actively violent and harming and hurting people. And so, and it's not just, you know, their policy actions, which is terrible, and they're just like they want to talk about how we're going to reform police, and then they don't. They read that, they walk it back, and they don't do anything. But, you know, again, like I was talking about how this whole, the liberal backlash against Me Too when Tara Reade came forward is very violent against survivors, and it re-traumatizes them. I saw some, these are real tweets from Biden supporters on Twitter, where they're constantly doing this thing where it's like they come up with the most horrifying idea, like example of what they would tolerate in the world, and then they put it all out there in public on Twitter for you to see, and they act like you should be impressed by it. Like, this is what I'm willing to put up with. Look at, I'm just the most long-suffering martyr in the world. Isn't that great for me? And I'm like, this is horrifying. Nobody should brag about this. Nobody, like, oh my God, I can't believe you put this out there and say it like it's normal. So just as, you know, just as an example, these are pretty bad, but these are what Biden supporters, these are real tweets from people talking about Biden. One said, I would vote for Biden if he raped 100 women at gunpoint. The stakes are high in this election. Okay, that's awful. Second one, even if Biden sexually assaulted me, I'd still vote for him. In fact, in the off chance this has happened, I encourage people that meet this criteria to vote for him anyway. Wow. So support your rapist no matter who. Okay. And the last one here, this is probably the most disturbing one I've seen. If Biden had raped my child, yes, I'd still prefer him over Trump as POTUS. This is just like, this is the discourse now. This is what it's come to. And it's so horrifying. It's just, and like, to some extent, this is the banter that I see floating through my newsfeed and floating and like scrolling through Twitter. This is, but they just say this like it's fine. And so, you know, I feel the need to both aggressively push back against it and to protect myself from it, you know, and liberals or conservatives will look at that and say, oh, you just want your echo chamber. I cannot read this all day and be bombarded by it and listen to liberals, especially people that claim to be socialists or leftists, saying anything to this effect. Oh, this election is the one that's so important that you have, you know, they say that every election. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Every year, this is the one, and maybe next time when there isn't two actual demons running for president, then that's when I can do whatever I want. And they say this like they get to dictate our reactions, or like voting is mandatory. And like, oh, well, then you support Trump? Of course I don't support Trump. Absolutely not. But this is in Australia. Voting isn't mandatory. I don't have to vote for either of those guys. And we have our own candidate. I support Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. They're amazing candidates. Their platform represents me, and they earned that vote. But that's, you know, that's a whole other issue other than like, I'm sorry, can we go back and talk about the part where you said Biden could rape your child and you would still, like, I refuse to have this conversation. I'm not, so I have to shut it down. I have to separate myself from it. And I don't want to dignify it with a response. And so I kind of wish that more people would do that and send the message to the people in their immediate circles that it's not okay to say things like that, and that you're not going to just, you know, oh, well, they're my friend, I've known a long time, or they're my relative, so it's okay for them to just say these things. Like, you should be ostracized from society if you are going around in public saying you would look the other way if a child is raped, if a woman is raped. Like, I don't even know if you don't meet any minimum moral standards as a person at that point. So, so that's why it's so, and it's that much worse when I constantly see liberals talking about how, you know, oh, Trump could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote. Well, let's take a little review of what you guys said you would put up with. All around, it's terrible. And none of you have to be doing any of that. There are other candidates. And I understand how our electoral system works and that it is not designed, you know, to include third parties. That's on purpose. I don't care. I'm not voting for these horrible capitalists. I don't want to be in the same room with people who think that those statements are acceptable or that those actions are okay. And I will not. So they need to sort that out and do some introspection on their own part. It's just, you know, when you see that happen, you know, and then you see Alyssa Milano and these other celebrities who scrubbed all mentions of #MeToo and Believe Women from their social media after Biden was nominated and Tara Reade's accusation. And then, oh, you know, they want to retroactively pretend that like, oh, I never said that. That didn't happen. History is repeating itself. As many of you may recall, in 2016, the text "You have the right to be believed" was edited out of Hillary Clinton's website after a tweet from Juanita Broaddrick went viral where she alleged sexual assault at the hands of Bill Clinton. And then it's, never mind, I actually, like, no, you have the right to be believed. That is the message they're sending. I'm just gonna literally edit this out of my platform and you are excluded. You are not accounted for in my vision of equality for women or empowerment of women's issues. So that's what happens when we keep letting it slide, when we just don't care. Why would they ever stop? Our position has to come from a place of integrity and consistency and that intersectional feminism that we talked about. So, you know, and again, just reiterating that understanding, there's no amount of police murder of Black people that's acceptable. There's no amount of droned kids that's okay. There's no amount of deported families, and there is no quantity of sexual assaults that we're going to say, yeah, that's an okay number for me. No, absolutely not. These are atrocities. These are life-ruining events. Juanita Broaddrick said, you know, this happened when she was 35 and now she's in her 70s and it doesn't go away. And it's true. For those who have not experienced that situation, it is absolutely true. And you relive it every time you see this play out in public this way. So it's so demeaning and it's so insulting to survivors and to women, especially to, God help you if you are a Black woman or you are a disabled woman, and you know, it just, they feed it. They're already looking for reasons to blame you. And oh, why did you come forward now? Why did you wait? Maybe because they saw the person was running for president and they felt compelled to speak out, and they knew they were going to be attacked for it, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're fulfilling their prediction by blaming and harassing and doxing and insulting them. That's why they wait. It's bad enough to see nothing happen to your perpetrator, and then to have that compounded by seeing the inaction and the I aggressively do not care what happened to you. I want you to be quiet and go away. You're just looking for money. You're looking for attention. Nobody wants to be famous for sexual assault. Just throwing that out there for sure. So we have to just really recognize as socialists that, you know, especially like whether it's with sexual assault or like yesterday, Ruth Bader passed away. And now there's this renewed conversation of, well, we need to have Democrats in power to protect women's rights. What about Roe versus Wade? But what do liberals do when they're in power? They suppress and co-opt grassroots movements. Look at what happened with the No DAPL protests at Standing Rock. Look at what happened in Flint. And look at what's happening with George Floyd and with Me Too. They'll take it on for a minute to try and like, let me get the photo op with somebody and pretend that I care and get a nice soundbite that I can include in my fundraising commercial. And then I will neutralize it and send it to the graveyard of movements. And when they're not in power, liberals organize ineffective events like the Women's March, which despite its incredibly large turnout, had zero demands and accomplished all of them. Here in Washington, there was a Women's March in Olympia, which is the capital, and the official event for the Women's March in Olympia welcomed Trump supporters into the fold. It said, you are not allowed to bring signs that are anti-Trump. What is this march even for then? We're just gonna go out for ladies being ladies and get brunch and bring our Harry Potter signs and say that we did something? Like, and wear our pussy hats. Like, I bought my official hat. I spent the money and I did the capitalist thing, and now I have something to put on, and like, the end. That's the end of my organizing effort. There was no demand. And there certainly was no agitation and no tension. Oh, we got all our permits. We high-fived every cop. Somebody pointed out when that happened, like, you had millions of people out there. You could have seized the state with these numbers. So I don't want to hear about what independents are supposed to be doing when liberals have all the power and refuse to do anything meaningful or substantive. They want to have their activism commodified. They want to donate to Act Blue, buy the pussy hat, buy the safety pin, and all right, I'm done. I followed up on my action step. They don't want to think about organizing beyond voting and opening their wallets, which are pretty ample, as we're seeing with the really enormous Act Blue outpouring that started last night with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this is also why they value property over human lives, because of the commodification. And then what white feminism says is that you have value if you're rich and powerful and you have this property and you have this money. And that makes them fundamentally incapable of doing what is necessary to protect women, Black people, or really anyone else. You know, they're in it for themselves. Whether they win the election or not, you know, it's like, oh, they're just doing it for the votes. I mean, yeah, I guess, but like, they get paid either way. All these people are millionaires. They have all the same lobbyists, all the same donors. They are living large. They have their extra large freezers full of goodies while working class people get to worry about evictions and a pandemic, which has been out of control since March, while other countries around the world did what they were supposed to do, imposed a real stringent lockdown, and have effectively contained and neutralized the virus. So that's, you know, here listening to elected Democrats talk about, you know, we all need to do our part, like in California and Oregon and here in Washington. You're the governor, you have the power. They're not willing to do what's necessary. They'll always have an excuse, whether they're the minority or whether they do have the power to push something through. They're just not going to do it because that's not why they're there. They're there to get paid and get money and get clout and attention and support. So I think I just want to close by mentioning that you know, one of the weirdest and most disturbing fallout effects of the Me Too movement is the way that I see people talking about the men that are the perpetrators. They treat them as the victims. They say, "Oh, that guy got Me Too'd." You know, that's just like, I don't know, turning the whole narrative on its head. We're talking about women who have been abused and assaulted and had the strength and the courage. They found that somewhere to come forward and share this deeply personal story, put themselves out there knowing we live in a culture that will shame and impugn and harass them. And, oh, that guy got Me Too'd. Oh, they had to ruin his career, his promising, beautiful career. And we have to change the way we talk about that. And so bring it back into the conversation, but do it in a way that's really intentional, deliberate, and center the survivors, center the victims. We want to talk about Me Too in the appropriate setting. You know, that Believe Women doesn't mean what they wanted it to mean was when Elizabeth Warren said, "Oh, Bernie said that women can't be president. Believe women." We're talking about survivors of abuse and sexual assault here. That's irrelevant. So we're not going to use it to co-opt it to support rich, white, millionaire Democrat women. That's, you know, that's not, you know, when they talk about things that have nothing to do with sexual assault and abuse. It is an important movement. It deserves the support, but not in the opportunistic, really unashamedly transparent way that Democrats talk about it and abuse it and then discard it when it no longer is convenient for them, doesn't serve their purposes. So we have to bring that back into the fold. And I know that, you know, because of the nature of sexism, women will be sidelined and their opinions will be discounted. So it is valuable to have male allies, our socialist comrades, come forward and say those things too, and push back and challenge the Democrats that are just going to say, vote for Biden, or you support Trump, or you hate women and you're letting sexism destroy everything. And there's nothing heroic in supporting a rapist. There's just not. And getting all hands on deck to recommit to that message is going to be really important. Not just in, with this year, but going forward. We really need to ground ourselves in that intersectional feminism, and thinking about, what this conversation, thinking about the woman who's reading that, who's being subjected to it, and can I at least challenge that? Can I support the survivors that are seeing this happen, and do so in a way that's class conscious, that is aware of, women in all their diversity, and truly support them with consistency and with integrity. So I think I kind of have rambled on longer than I intended to, but I want to close it there. But I really appreciate everybody that took the time to join us today. I think we're going to hand it back for some Q&A, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Greg, how much more time do we have? Can you hear me? Oh, well, anyway.
I can hear you, Steph. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was muted. You were from 3 till 4, so about a couple more minutes. I mean, you can go a little.
We can't get more time.
You can go another 15.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. You hit so many good points. And I wish I would have done a 90-minute seminar, because when I first did it, I didn't want to put too much of a burden on everyone, so I figured we'd each speak a lot, but I should have figured this is a very complicated issue. And thank you, everybody, for speaking. It's, you kind of think these things, but it's good to hear another person say it and know that someone else is thinking, that's having the same, rage thoughts when they read this stuff online. And so,
if I could bring one thing to Chelsea, if you look at the migrant farm workers that last year, going through the media and things, maybe the year before a little bit, in the Me Too movement, they started to talk about the sexual assaults and the expected sexual favors by landowners of women that are working the crops and things. And so there was a small movement starting about that. And then the minute the pandemic hit and those people became essential workers, all talk of that stopped, because if you look at the meat packing plants, if you look at the fields, if you look at the grocery stores and things like that, by and large, they're populated by women and people of color. And because they're essential workers, they're now not allowed to bitch. And
yeah.
they're not allowed to quit their jobs because they're in danger and they're not being protected. And then also they have to put up with the populace in general that has obviously decided the word essential means expendable.
Yeah, it's very much backwards. They're not being protected with PPE. They're not getting hazard pay. And essential seems to mean like, everyone just be quiet and get this done because we need you to actually do this critical, feed everybody. Well,
and I think if you look at the timeline of the George Floyd movement and things, the reason, at least around here, that we had a lot of people in the street was because they weren't working. And almost immediately after that, in my area in the Midwest, you had governors that were opening up the states, not in Illinois, thank goodness, but he still has gone further than health professionals think he should have as far as opening up. But a large portion of that, as the movement is to get kids back into school, is you don't want people sitting around thinking about what's going on in their lives.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'll shut up and we will take questions from the audience.
I think we have a little bit of time to take some questions or comments. So if you want to go in the chat box. I mean, we'll talk more if you. We can talk about this all day. How can one be an ally for feminism?
Please be an accessory, not an ally.
I don't know. That's another thing for debate, whether it's an ally or. I mean, I would say the most important thing is to call yourself a feminist, and men play an important role, because when it comes to men doing sexist stuff, when women complain about it or say something, you know, we're just overreacting or emotional. But when another man steps in and says, hey dude, you know, that's not cool, think about what you're doing, and like, you know, whatever works, whatever might convince them to see things differently, that's a very important thing to do. What do you guys think, Ari?
Yeah.
I think, honestly, like I said, I would not have made it through my bachelor's without incredibly, I mean, they were a lot older men, which was kind of surprising. But that without men mentoring, backing women up, advocating and things like that, because at that time they were the ones at my university that held the power. So for a man, like you said, to say, hey, dude, no, you can't do that, or talk about her like that, because a lot of times the quote unquote locker room talk happens where a woman doesn't hear it, but the attitude then that permeates the workplace, believe me, she knows about that. And so I think that men being aware of what's going on is really important, and backing women up and advocating for women. And for, I mean, biggest thing is if you just got a raise and you're a guy and you're doing the same job as, you know, Maria down the block or whatever at the same company, tell her you just got a raise so she can go and get hers, you know, kind of thing. Because that's a large part of what I think we need from men, is to have them advocating as well as cleaning up the messes other men make.
Exactly. And I wanted to share something that Mimi would always say, because he always loved for us to do these workshops, and he was always, you know, spending lots of time making sure people knew about it, and he thought it was very important. But he would always say, the people that come to these workshops are the ones that usually don't need to go to them. So I'm excited that we can get this online and continue this conversation, and hopefully some more people that kind of need to hear this a little more hear it.
Yeah, and if I can just add a little bit there, I think that one thing that I would always like to see more of from men who are on the left or who identify as socialists is that, like, if a woman does challenge you from the left to see things from a different perspective, or to say like, hey, this actually isn't women's experience, that you seem to have this perception that it is, like, you know, try not to be defensive about that, because if they, you know, if they didn't care, they wouldn't say anything, right? It's like, we're trying to just get on the same page. We're trying to relate our lived experiences to you. And I have, you know, very recently had experiences where I see guys who added me off Leftbook who are, they say that they're socialists, and they post these things like, why don't women just say what they mean and tell men how they really feel so they can date them? And like, maybe because when women say how they really feel, then they get attacked and killed. Like, how about that? So, and you know, and I say those things, and then the, you know, the guy like just blocks me. That's one way to respond to
Well, and the one thing I do want to say is I'm not against holding women accountable for their actions, because I got dragged like crazy the other day on Twitter because I said that the woman who had come out, who had been sitting in DC working in the White House since Bush, that finally came out and made her commercial, and she did get paid for it. And people were trying to excuse her not coming out sooner because, you know, she was a woman and maybe she was in danger and maybe this and maybe that and the other thing. And I said, she's a professional woman. She's over 40 years old. If she really realized this was going on and she had a moral conscience, she should stand up. And yes, I do know how dangerous that is. I've had guns pointed in my face for my ethics. And so, but it was an incredible thing. I mean, half the people thought I was a Trump supporter troll, and then the other half the people thought that, I was dissing getting a woman on our side kind of thing. And it's like, no, women should be held accountable, but so should men, and we got to stop playing the both sides game.
Yeah, well, and anyone can be sexist, and sexism hurts men as well.
Well, look at, what happens even before the pandemic in health. Men had a shorter lifespan. They have more of the now pre-existing conditions. Stress kills. And if you look at the lifespan of women over the last 40 years, when I was born, my lifespan was expected to be about 85. Now it's 72. So it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what happened? But for men, it's like 70 something. I don't even remember. It keeps going down. And so that's, if men want to be self-interested, it's about your life.
Yeah. Feminism is about gender equality.
And definitely just when it comes to women, just, really make that effort to hear women out when they tell you about what their experience is like. Try not to talk over or correct or whatever that is, but just like, try to understand when we share with you that, like, that's always a source of tension for me. Like, do I really want to even go there? Because I know they're probably going to get defensive and they're going to get upset. And I'm literally just talking about my own experience. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not anything I found to be the case in my years of life. And they're just like, yes, it is. And that's it. And one thing that I have discovered that's really interesting is that, like, when I share things on our Socialist Party page, like, a page is like this neutral, genderless thing, right? And people share it more and they engage more and they take it more seriously. And if I share those exact same things myself as a woman, then I get questioned and I get attacked. Some guy said the exact same thing I do. Everybody likes that comment, and I'm just like, so there's, like, being a woman online is like perilous, and we can always use the support. We can always use a listening ear and comrades who are willing to be supportive and back us up and listen, truly. Try to, when we speak from our lived experience, it's like, to understand that it's difficult to do that, and we want to, but we want to share because we want to be understood, and we want to be on your side. So it's not an attack; it's an opportunity to learn.
Very true. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we could wrap up. And I really appreciate the speakers. I really enjoyed what you had to say, and I hope we could do more things like this.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you for giving us your time, and thanks for the SP for giving us the space and the online capabilities.
Yep. Thank you for joining and to take time to listen, share. I guess I understand that all the workshops will be available online later on, so just maybe that will be a resource that you could look to share with others if it helps to answer people's questions or to address some of these issues that we're seeing right now with Black Lives Matter, with the Me Too movement. That could be another way to kind of bring in a resource and share information with people.
Well, and for anybody that doesn't know this, which I hope you all do, the Me Too movement was actually started long before it arose to fame and fortune by a Black woman.
Yep.
And, she was basically ignored for several years. So please, if you have a female partner, if you know somebody that is a non-woman and they want to be active, please join the Women's Commission, because we do need people, we need your input. And I'm getting old, and I will say right out, I'm tired. So I'm glad there's people coming up behind me, though. Gives me hope, keeps me going.
Okay, folks, thank you so much. Sorry if I felt like I rushed you. I have a 4:30 panel, and we're on the same Zoom account, so I didn't want to push them aside. Yeah, please, what Ariana said, you know, the Women's Commission exists, and we need more voices and more folks. It was great to see about 20 people here today, and I will tighten this video up and put it online with some links if we have some. The next workshop will be Southern Networking, remotely building up the SPUSA in the South at 4:30. And we added an additional workshop after the discussion last night. We have an LGBTQ plus organizing discussion at 6 p.m. So if you're interested in that, I will shoot that link out again to all the registered folks for the conference. And thanks again for Ariana, Stephanie, and Chelsea, and everybody who attended this workshop, and I hope you can attend some of the other ones over the next 2 days.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, we'll see you in another room.